Hello and welcome to the big picture. Afghanistan finally has a new president. After months of political wrangling, the election season, which began in April this year, ended yesterday with the two presidential candidates signing a power-sharing deal. Ashraf Ghani Ahmadzai will be the next president of Afghanistan, and Abdullah, who had emerged as the runner-up in the presidential elections, will now be the chief executive as per the power-sharing deal. However, the final vote totals were not released, fearing further escalation of tensions, as Abdullah had alleged fraud in the June vote. With this new power-sharing arrangement now in place, Afghanistan's political crisis, it is hoped, has ended, paving way for a smooth transition of power. The deal is learned to have been clinched by the US Secretary of State John Kerry. We will discuss today the unique power-sharing deal reached and whether it will hold and what it means to the entire region. To discuss this, I have with me Shashank, former Foreign Secretary, Rana Banerjee, former Special Secretary, Cabinet Secretariat and a Security Analyst, Professor Gulshan Sachdeva, Center for European Studies at the JNU, and Anand Sahay, Coordinating Editor, Asian Age. Welcome to all of you. Mr. Shashank, what kind of a power-sharing deal is this? Has this kind of a deal been made somewhere else, and do you think that this is something new and unique?
It's a unique deal, but it should be the precursor of similar deals elsewhere. Because after all, democracy in the Western sense at present means mostly that once you are past the post, then you take away everything.
Yes.
Whereas there might be a very large significant minority or even majority holding completely different views.
Right.
So therefore, it's very important that at least in decision-making processes, there should be involvement of everyone. In our own case, we know that our Prime Minister, when he came to power, he talked of sabka ha, sabka saath. So, isi tarike se, the way Afghanistan, I think this is really a great achievement on the part of the US Secretary of State, that he has been able to bring the two rival candidates together. So, in principle, it should be very promising for Afghanistan and for the region.
Okay. Professor Gulshan Sachdeva, would you agree with Mr. Shashank?
Absolutely. In fact, if you read the whole agreement carefully, I think this is an excellent blueprint for political transition of Afghanistan. You see, of course, there are certain specific things which are power, the division of power between CEO and the president. But along with that, if you see, now there are also promise of Constitutional Amendment Commission. There is also, they are going to have Civil Service Commission reforms. They're also going to have assembly elections, local elections. And then many more things. And then what they are saying, that after the end of 2 years, when all these commissions are going to submit their reports, then they are going to have Loya Jirga. And in that Loya Jirga, they are also going to discuss basically possibility of executive prime minister. So it means it's a long-term kind of a plan. First 2 years, preparing for political transition. Then if Loya Jirga agree, it means the whole political class agree to that. Then you have a new political institutions. I think in the given circumstances, you can't have better deal than this.
Banerjee, would you agree?
Well, yes, though I'd not be so optimistic. It's a deal, yes, but democracy is still a far cry. So there are...
it's very interesting that the final votes were not allowed to be...
yes, I think it's a concession to both the candidates who were, this was a very hotly contested result, and the concept of fraud, which may have affected the ballots of both candidates, and the long, arduous process which was gone through of auditing by a special, process. It is best perhaps that it's left undeclared, because the exact margin of the fraud then gets obfuscated. And the deal, the focus shifts onto the deal, where the runner-up has made significant gains in terms of powers delegated by the president.
Right. So very significant power, Anand. And also, so you also agree that not giving the number of votes, not keeping it as a secret is a good thing, or you think that at some point of time you've been there, you've worked with them, you know these people.
I think we all know the result as well. See, Girish, I think that people went to the election in April
yes.
to elect a president under the existing constitution. what we have got is a president and a prime minister.
President and a prime minister, actually, yes.
Yes. So it's like buy one, get one free.
Get one free.
Okay. So the virtually a constitutional amendment dovetailed into an election for the president. And this itself is the consequence of a very major crisis which stared Afghanistan in the face, because one of the candidates felt that he was being cheated in the very first round of election. So the second round was held. The second round, 8 million ballots were recounted.
This was in June?
Yes, in June. The ballots were recounted under UN supervision. After the counting of the ballot, obviously someone has got more than the other, right? And yet, officially, the result has not yet been announced, which means there is a serious problem, because you expect some kind of turmoil in the system. So it's called a unity government. For how long? This is obviously not what we see now, is not the result of the counting of what people voted, right? It's a question of political understanding. And then the notion of this being put to the Loy Jirga, the Grand Assembly, 2 years from now, this is something unusual, but nevertheless it's a Grand Assembly of that country, a traditional institution. So I suppose that's all right. Eventually, all constitutions, everything that people do, in the larger framework does reflect the existing political balance of forces. But the very fact that they had to resort to this, roundabout way of constitutional amendment when people had voted for the president itself shows the gravity of the crisis. Now, I think the good news is that for the moment at least, that gravity has receded. Perhaps there's a proviso here, that the president and what I would call the virtual co-president,
Chief executive.
No, I know. I mean, I have seen the whole document yesterday, but that apart, I'm saying what is virtually a co-president.
Right.
I use the word virtually, right? So how well, not just they, but their followers, get on with each other on the ground. That, to a certain degree, will matter crucially, because I think the people willy-nilly will accept it. I think it's a great deal will depend on how the world community, the Friends of Afghanistan, which includes India, what are how the kind of advice they give, and it is not going to be an easy balance, and this came through yesterday also. When the two were there in front of President Karzai and the thing was being signed, right? The whole thing was over in less than 8-9 minutes. Someone said 10 minutes. And, it has not been an easy acceptance of the reality on either side, to my mind. And yet, in spite of the positive is, in spite of that serious situation, they have agreed to take this step. And this, I hope, and Friends of Afghanistan, and decidedly including India, should ensure that it does not go to the advantage of hostile neighbors of Afghanistan.
Absolutely. Mr. Shashank, the question is this. He was talking about, Friends of Afghanistan and things like that. And we know that the US Secretary of State has managed to. Do you think there has been any consultations with neighboring countries, India included, before working out this kind of a deal? You think India has been in any way involved in this?
I have not seen any clear-cut signs, but we had the first strategic partnership agreement with Afghanistan. So, by all means, there should have been some exchange of views, whether directly or indirectly. The point remains that there is a third party which is not there in the elections, because it was a presidential election. That is the people who are going to attack whatever government is in power. And therefore, that remains one of the unseen partners in this whole
Taliban?
tango. The Taliban, the various factions which are there. And then the second part is that the Friends of Afghanistan, or whatever the Bond group which is set up, so they are the ones who provide most of the funding for Afghanistan's development projects. So would they feel assured enough to now contribute to Afghanistan's development plans. And third issue remains the American presence, because Americans would definitely insist, and if Karzai could not deliver on the expectations of the United States who get the status of forces agreement signed, would the new coalition which we have now worked out be able to do that and still continue to get the support of Loya Jirga, etc.?
That's very interesting. Mr. Banerjee, you think that that has been worked out also, which has not been announced as far as the Americans are concerned?
No, now the bilateral security arrangement will definitely be signed by the new president.
So you think that has been one of the preconditions for this kind of a
that is implicit.
deal?
Actually, in the whole drafting of this agreement also, the role played by the American ambassador in Afghanistan, Mr. James Cunningham, was crucial. He was instrumental in having the two candidates have more than 40 meetings together to trash out the modalities of the various provisions. But I think the success of the arrangement will hinge on the process of appointments. There is
before that, I want you to tell me about both, the kind of involvement of India and Pakistan in this.
No, I don't think
You
in the
think
drafting...
there's been any involvement at all?
No, I don't think in the drafting of the agreement there would have been any involvement.
You don't think so?
No.
Anand?
Well, I think I agree with Mr. Banerjee that Pakistan would certainly not have been consulted officially in this matter. Unofficially, we do know that Pakistan counts for a good deal, in the eyes of the Americans, in the eyes of the United Nations, not in the eyes of the Afghans themselves, incidentally. But the thing is this: it will be. We should watch, because they have done some very unusual things in that document.
Like?
There is the cabinet.
And the cabinet will be, the meetings of the cabinet, council of ministers will be taken by the chief executive.
No, so hold on. So there is the cabinet, and the ministers are part of the cabinet. Then there is a separate thing which says that the council of ministers will not be part of the cabinet, and it will be chaired by the prime minister.
Yes, chief executive.
I mean, I'm saying prime minister, right? Who is also a member of the cabinet along with the two vice presidents and advisors and so forth. But as was pointed out just now, that it will be very important to see, and it's a very kind of, I think it's not very good drafting in my view, though the circumstances in which the drafting was done was extremely tight. In a short period of time, you have to please two contending forces, with the Taliban, etc., very active, with security system, with economic system in certain amount of disarray. In that situation, something they have done, and they've put forward something which is the saving grace for now. But the choice of personnel. Now, Dr. Abdullah's running mate was Muhammad Khan, who was the intelligence chief of Hekmatyar at one time. So, what kind of role does he have? I cannot say. Will people have the wisdom, to keep extremely sharp elements out? You may keep somebody as your own advisor and so forth. That's fine. But to bring them into the cabinet system and so on, the kind of security and economic and officials of at that highest level, the appointments will be made by the president and the prime minister in consultation with each other. That's why earlier I said that what we have now is a virtual co-president and a co-president, not prime minister. Absolutely. And mind you, the way the thing has gone, if I was a candidate in the runoff, I would rather not win and be president, because the president's powers, I don't know, it's not clear to me what they are. And by losing, I have all the powers that the president has virtually.
Professor Sachdeva, Gulshan, you think that, do you feel like this about this power sharing agreement? That here is a loser, apparent loser. We don't know how much he lost from, how much, what was the margin of defeat and things like that. But here is a, as Anand put it.
No, not. I mean, somebody will lose, right? I'm not talking about this case, but the constitution is a document.
Yeah.
Well, whatever we may like it or may not like it, it may look very complicated, it may look pretty messy situation. But, to me, it seems like this is a genuine Afghan product rather than imposed from somebody else. So, in that case, I mean, this is the first ever transition of power through democratic means in Afghanistan.
Right.
And this is going to happen. And this is a democratic process in that sense which has just begun. So as I was saying, within that context, I see this is perhaps the excellent blueprint you can have for the next few years if they are going to implement it. Now, of course, there are serious problems. People would be doubtful whether they are going to continue for the next few years together. Whether this government is going to continue for 5 years, we don't know. Because this is like any other coalition government. They may survive 5 years, they may not survive 5 years, but one should not really be too much worried about that. If they are able to perhaps, say for example, in the next 2 years, if they are able to make some genuine constitutional amendments, if they are able to make some genuine electoral reforms, because why we are here, because there was serious problem with the electoral process. If they are able to do some electoral process there, if they are able to conduct local body elections, if they are able to reform the Civil Service Commission, all these things are listed in this whole agreement. And I think if the agenda is huge, at the same time, the challenges which the country is facing. Now, immediately within the next few weeks, they have to sign the bilateral security agreement with the US. At the same time, because on that basis, they are going to get funding for the next few years. And that funding is crucial, particularly for the Afghan National Security Forces, because now already, for the last few years, Taliban, they were basically just concentrating on few terrorist attacks. Now what we have seen in the last few months, and which is going to be the pattern, I think, in the next few months, they are going to go for certain territorial gains. Already we have seen that particularly in the two provinces, in Helmand as well as in Logar, they have already identified these two regions. And already Afghan National Security Forces, they have lost about a couple of hundred soldiers there. So these are the areas which I think strategically they find they're very crucial. So, there are serious security challenges which this government is going to face. At the same time, serious economic problems. And at least if they are able to cobble together some kind of government, and this is in sense, when we talk about reconciliation with the Taliban, this is the first reconciliation which actually is happening within Afghan society, then with the neighbors. Many of the processes are continuing. Within that context, I would say still this is a very useful thing which has happened.
Mr. Shashank, reconciliation, is this, Anand also was raising this point, and the fact is that these were two rival groups which fought bitterly the elections and even after the elections. Now for them to come together, okay, US Secretary of State has brought these two leaders together, but bringing the rank and file together, bringing the different people together, the different tribes together, will Americans be still around to help them out?
Well, first thing is Americans want to have an orderly exit.
Yes.
If they had to leave without a reconciliation process between the two rival candidates, it would have looked very shabby arrangement. So they were investing a huge amount of capital in just bringing the two candidates together and working very, very hard to see that Abdullah is not left out, because Abdul Ghani, all said and done, has lived mostly outside Afghanistan and would not be able to take care, though he's a Pashtun, but he may not be able to take care of the kind of complications which are there in Afghanistan at present. Abdullah has shown that, while he has also lived abroad for a time, but then that he has a greater grasp on the tribal affiliations on both sides, Pashtun side as well as the Tajik side. So therefore, Americans know that on a longer term basis, these Afghan leaders will have to work out their own equations, see how the security forces, etc., can be kept up. Right now, they want to leave because there are congressional elections at the end of the year, and then there will be next 2 years for the president to decide. So he wants to go out in an orderly fashion. That's the first priority. Second priority will come when they have the security agreement signed with Afghanistan. That will take more time, and we do not know how that will work out. So if we have to see whether, in the meantime, while the American forces are withdrawing by the end of 2014, what happens? Would Pakistan play ball? Would there be attacks, more Taliban attacks on the retreating forces? So all these things will decide to what extent the Afghans would be willing to move ahead and whether they can do a better job than, because Hamid Karzai has been there for so many years, but he has not been able to rule beyond a limited part of Afghanistan.
Part of Banerjee. The crucial thing is that Pakistan will have to come in at some point of time. Once the Americans move out, then Pakistan, what kind of a role Pakistan will have in that country. So you think that they have been kept out completely out of this process, and what will be the consequence of that? How do you think Pakistan would be viewing this deal itself?
No, the deal, you see, they prefer Ashraf Ghani to total control by Abdullah. To that extent, you see, the fact that Ashraf Ghani has been made president ensures that the Pashtun card at least has been made prominent in the position of in the post of the president. But they will not change their traditional policy of supporting the Taliban. They have already started, assisting them in more concrete terms in the resurgence that Gulshan was talking about, which has happened in Helmand and also in Nangarhar and Logar and in Kunduz. So the ANA has been losing ground, and the allegations have been made that Pakistan has again started helping with the actual serving personnel in disguised garb. Also the operations that are taking place in North Waziristan. This has led to a lot of Tehreek-e-Taliban people escaping to Kunar and going along and fighting with the Taliban there, the Afghan Taliban there. So even the Punjabi Taliban has recently given a statement that we will not, we'll stop attacking the Pakistani army and we will direct our energies to Afghanistan. So none of that support is going to change. But regarding this agreement itself, as I was saying, it will be a top-heavy arrangement, you see, because there will be 2 of the vice presidents of Karzai, then 2 of the running mates of Ashraf Ghani, then 2 of the running mates of Abdullah. Will they all be accommodated? The agreement talks about, recognizing broad participation of meritorious personalities. Merit will be decided by a specific mechanism between Ashraf Ghani and Abdullah. Now, all this is very vague. What specific mechanism? Whether it will accommodate all the warlords or their nominees, whether the ethnic aspirations would be balanced in this type of mechanism. All this will first have to be decided, then only reconciliation with the Taliban. That is actually the more important process. Whether these 2 jointly can offer a platform for reconciliation with the Taliban and whether the Pakistanis will allow the Taliban to go along with this process. That is what is going to be important for the stability, future stability and peace in Afghanistan.
Anand, how do you think the Taliban will react to all this?
Well, the Taliban would like to be there themselves, but they know that they were. What has happened is a positive step on the whole. It is full of inner complications and contradictions, but it's a firefighting measure which has succeeded thanks to the big push given by the Americans. Right?
And do you agree with Mr. Shashank that Americans had no option but to work out something like this because they want to exit smoothly?
Certainly exit smoothly. I mean, I would go along with almost everything which everybody has said. I think people who are talking to you have been following the thing, and there may be some differences of assessment of a particular aspect of something. But I think I'm glad personally that Americans were there to give that big push, because the only people who have that kind of clout with all sides, clout meaning clout backed with money and weapons and everything, are the Americans, right? So in difficult and clumsy circumstances, they have produced a reasonable firefighting device, right? How things proceed on the ground will depend. Well, the BSA, I think, will be signed. That's fair enough. But after that, at the political level, how these 2 main leaders, the president and the chief executive, who will be the prime minister, how they, above all, conduct themselves. Their own following will be looking out for signals all the time. Signals are contained in small and big things. So a lot will depend on how they conduct themselves. And I keep saying it's a very, very clumsy thing, because if this is going to enter the formal constitution, if the old constitution, inspired by the Bonn Conference, is finished for all practical purposes, then in the new constitution, which this thing presages, this is the result of a runoff, right? But supposing in a transparent way and there is no vote rigging, etc., one person emerges the clear winner in the first round.
What happens?
No, then will you still have the prime minister? What happens, it's a straightforward question. So for that reason, I'm saying that we are going through a complicated patch. Now, the people of Afghanistan also show patience, but I think the people of Afghanistan have been extremely wise in the manner in which they voted in the month of April. The weather was bad and the Taliban were up to their old tricks, and yet they delivered a very high percentage of vote, surprising the whole world, right? which means they know what to guard against. They know in what direction they want to go. It's now up to the leaders to deliver.
Gulshan, the constitutional, you think that they'll be able to, the existing constitution will have to be overturned. Now this arrangement has to be constitutionally supported.
Well, that's why in fact they'll have a constitutional commission, a constitutional amendment commission, which is going to submit its reports in the next few months, and then it will be debated.
Because we have seen constitution making has not been easy in our neighborhood. We have seen Nepal, what has happened, and you think in a torn country like Afghanistan, it's going to be easy at all?
No, it is not going to be an easy process, but I mean, at least the process they have been laid down, which they have agreed. And even in fact, in the new process, I can see that many more people could be even accommodated, because now you have a president and the CEO. At the same time, you also have 2 vice presidents and 2 deputy CEOs. So many, factions could be accommodated. That's what I was saying. So what you need is, this is the first major serious reconciliation is happening within Afghanistan. Then you need reconciliation somehow with the Taliban, which they have already actually rejected this agreement. They have just come out with their own statement that we don't agree with whatever the agreement they have made. Then in fact, you also need reconciliation between Afghanistan and Pakistan, which is again a very serious matter. So all these are, as I was mentioning, there are so many serious challenges, and within that context, whatever you can get, at least now there is some hope that there is some guideline, there is some blueprint on the basis of which at least people can have some hope. How they are going to deliver, that's going to be a serious issue. But this is what. But only I think the hope is that both Ghani Saab as well as Dr. Abdullah, they are seasoned politicians. At the same time, they have long experience in administration, and they know the challenges ahead the country. At the same time, the importance of their relations with the US as well as with the neighbors. I think they are fully aware of all these complications. That's why perhaps they have made this kind of arrangement and kind of compromise.
Mr. Shashank, Indian role in all these things. What do you think India should do now? How do you think India should go about this? And if it has not been consulted, there must be some kind of a discomfort in the Indian government and foreign office about the way things have been have happened there?
Well, Indians would be less uncomfortable than in the past, because in the past Indians were always kept out on the specious ground that Pakistan would object to it and would not like it. So that stage has gone. And now idea is to involve all the regional countries, regional powers, trying to reconciliation process. Like the present reconciliation process, I think is extremely important. In fact, India has been quite unhappy with the reconciliation process, which are very opaque with the Taliban. Because the kind of distinctions which were being made, the people who were being picked up on the advice of Pakistan, gave rise to discomfort even within Afghan society. And Karzai was totally opposed to it because they felt that Pakistan was trying to interfere in Afghan system constantly. So here we have 2-3 points. One is that the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is likely to be strengthened further. And China has already expressed fully that they would like to see India in it. So India would be able to then contribute as a bilateral strategic partner to which whatever government is there, along with the United States. Modi would be going into US very shortly. This issue may come up for discussion. And then whatever systems we have with Shanghai Cooperation Organization, other regional countries, that Afghanistan should become a little more viable based on its own resources and resource exploitation development, rather than depending permanently only on the bond process and funding from outside.
Okay, very quickly, Mr. Banerjee, last words very quickly. This whole process of Afghanistan emerging on its own strength, but it has to be midwife still, and India needs to play a midwife role for a number of years at least.
Certainly, the overall commitment of India in development terms should remain. But as regards support for military purposes, that should not be any boots on the ground. There should be offer of training if the Afghans want it, training of their forces in India at various levels, which we have already worked out in the strategic partnership agreement, and supplies of equipment which are feasible for us to send to Afghanistan, again on their request. That should be made available.
Okay. I think on that note, we need to end. This power sharing deal is going to be looked at very closely by everybody around the world, as all my panelists welcome such a deal, but are still skeptical how it will work out. But let us hope that it will work out and we will have a more peaceful Afghanistan in the coming years. Thanks to all my guests, Professor Gulshan, Sachdeva, Shashank, Rana, Banerjee and Anand, Sahay. Please keep watching. We'll come back with another issue, The Big Picture, same time tomorrow.